Lit people. This is your final lecture for the spring semester of 2020. This is Friday, April 17th, and this is Dr. Graves, and we're going to finish up our discussion of Shardik. I have just a few loose ends I want to wrap up regarding Shardik. Then we'll review your study guide, what's going to be on the final exam. And at least sadly for me, I'll be saying my goodbyes. So here we go. Let's look. I want to start with 3 excerpts from the last chapter of Shardik, chapter 58. There's been a gap of several years here. We find Keldric and Malithus married. They have 2 very young children. Keldric is the governor of Zaray. He works under the ban of Sarkid, Elroth very closely. And Zaray has been turned into a kind of colony for unwanted children. So it's a larger context than like an orphanage or a home. It is a whole colony where children who do not have a home, the children who would be vulnerable to the slave traders, are given a chance. It's all volitional. As Keldric explains to Siristru, no one is compelled. Notice again the importance of the will. It has to be voluntary. It has to be an exercise of their will. They have to want to join and become part of this. And we'll look again at the importance of the will here in Shardik and in Adam's treatment of the problem of evil one last time. But on page 590 in chapter 58, Siristru meets Malithus. He's shown in there and she greets him. Remember, he's a very extremely well-educated from an empire that is in some ways more sophisticated than the Beckland Empire, an empire that the Becklands didn't know existed, had never had contact with until they had built the bridge that Belkatrazit had designed across the Telthierna, and here Zaray suddenly is becoming this. The potential in the future is that it will become this very important trading post. So there are many places in the Roman Empire like that, from Antioch to Ephesus, to Philippi to Corinth, important trading outlets that the early church rooted in and grew up very quickly. So here's Zaray, and it's been this lost, backward place, but with Keldric and at the helm and exercising the will now of the Lord Shardik, what does the future hold? So here Siristru meets Malithus, and they're talking about the roles of women in their various societies. And again, we see that Zakalon, where Siristru is from, seems to be more advanced in some ways. Women own property. They're not viewed as the possessions of their husbands. And Siristru is wondering about Malithus, because if she's representative of the women there, he goes, "Forgive me, I lack the word. Your way suggests to me that women have a good deal of freedom here." Malithus laughed, evidently delighted. "Oh, don't go by me. When you reach Baklar, some husband will knife you. I'm a little unusual, though it would take too long to explain why. I was once a priestess, but apart from that, I've lived a very different sort of life from most women. And then again, this is still a remote, half-civilized province. And my husband can do with almost anyone, man or woman, especially when it comes to helping the children. I act freely on his behalf, and people accept it, partly because it's me, and partly because we need every head and every pair of hands we've got." Could she once have been some kind of sacred prostitute, thought Siristru. It did not seem likely. There was a certain delicacy and sensitivity about her, which suggested otherwise. "A priestess," he asked, "of the god of this country." Now listen very carefully to Malithus's answer. This is where we see that her redemption has been complete. She has been a vessel that's been broken, and at this point, she has been completely refashioned. She is a new creature, if you will. Of Lord Shardik, in a way, I'm still his priestess. Listen to what she says. I'm still his priestess, his servant, anyway. The girl you saw here just now, Zilthe, was also his priestess once. She was badly injured in his service, and that's how she came to be, as you see her now, poor girl. She came here from Bekla. She feels safer and happier with us. I understand, but Shardik, said Siristru. That's the second time today I've heard his name. Shardik gave his life for the children. Shardik saved them. Siristru had always had an excellent phonetic memory. Melithus clapped her hands, startled. Why, that's Dilgi you're speaking now. Wherever did you hear that? The ferrymen were singing it on the raft this morning. The Dilgi? Were they really? So why am I picking this passage out? Why is it so important? One, it shows this fully refashioned Malithus, the complete arc. Shardik's will has been fulfilled in her. Here she is, his servant. And what is she doing as a servant? She's caring for these unwanted children. She's being proactive to keep them free from being enslaved, or to free them from the slavery that neglect, as Keldrick said earlier, puts them into, or as he will explain later in the chapter. But the second point why I'm calling this to your attention and what's important is that when Siristru, when he repeats what he's heard about Lord Shardik, it's not in the language of the Artalgans. Remember, Malithus, Keldrick are Artalgans, that's their first language, and Shardik was the Artalgan god. And again, remember from the beginning, this association to keep in mind, Artalga, Judah, all right, Shardik, god of the Artalgans, who's the god of the Jews, Yahweh. So, and what's important here, what Adams is showing here with this one little insertion, is that the Dilgi are not Artalgans, they're not Beklans. They own the countryside. They're the country immediately on the other side of the river from Zareh. So it's if you will, they're Gentiles. If the Artalgans are Jewish, then the Dilgi are Gentiles. And here they're singing. They're the ferrymen rowing Siristru across, and they're singing this song, Shardik saved the children. Shardik gave his life for the children in their own language. And Adams is showing here, that this revelation, this death of Shardik for the children, this message, this truth, that God has revealed through the story of Shardik that we've been reading, is not just for the Artalgans, not just for the Beklans. It's for everyone. And was seen, if you will, the beginning of the spread of the gospel. The band of Sarkid, the Yeldashay, don't worship Shardik. They do now, and you should notice that detail as well, that the insignia, the banner for Zareh, is the corn sheaves of Sarkid with the bear inside of them. So notice that there's a spread that Shardik has given his life. Keldrick and Malithus have been broken by him, refashioned. These series of things that seem like coincidences, but are truly miraculous. They're truly evidence, if you will, of God's will, God's purpose of someone else working behind the scenes. And here it's spreading. Let's move on then to the second excerpt from chapter 58. I read part of this excerpt, and I challenged you to find the most important part of it, which I didn't share with you in the last lecture. And that's on the same page, on pages 598 and 599 of chapter 58 of Shardik. And this is where Siristru is saying, I understand religion, it's the imagination. So people people are connecting events there, if you will, in the language of our day, how our culture would put it, they're constructing meaning. It means that the basic worldview of our culture doesn't believe, like Manly Pointer, that there's any meaning there. More like Holga, because they want to be ethical. They want to insist on an ethical reality and on the reality of good and evil. When you deal away with any supernatural, good and evil become completely meaningless. They're just whatever who's in power decides they are. So if the government in power says that taking the lives of the unborn, killing fetuses in the womb is evil, then it's going to be evil. But if the government in power says it's not evil, then it's not evil. So there's no absolute here. And good and evil become, in essence, meaningless. They're just whatever people want to make them mean. But as Christians, Flannery O'Connor, Shardik, Dante, Prudentius, these people have been challenging us. As Christians, you can't say that. You don't believe that. Not if you're a Christian. Good and evil are defined by our God. They're absolutes. There's nothing in between. And the problem here, and the problem that Adams is showing, is when believers speak ignorantly for God. So here's Cowdrick, a believer, exercising government and saying that it's okay to a limited trade in slave trade in children is okay. Is he speaking? Is the eye of God seen as God sees? Is he speaking for God? He's a believer, remember? So he does believe in absolutes. But the absolutes that are not informing these decisions he's making now when he's regulating and he's defining what's right and wrong. Okay, legally it's okay to have a limited trade in children. So Adams is, if you will, he's explicating this. He's, in a sense, deconstructing this. He's taking it apart and saying, okay, good and evil are absolutes, and they're defined by God and God's being, by God's identity, who God is. And the problem here, the challenge is for fallen believers to know who God is. They know he's there. They believe in him. They're convinced in their hearts that Keldrick, Melithus, Belkatrazit, the Tuginda, they're convinced in their hearts Shardik is really God. But how does that translate into actions? And how does that affect the development of good and evil in them? So here's the governor explaining this to Siristru, Siristru being really careful because there's some really important trade agreements, new markets opening up here, and he doesn't want to compromise the trade potential here by offending the religious beliefs of Keldrick. And so he starts questioning. He feels he's offended him. I talked about this last time. And Keldrick responds, but he's not offended. He responds by saying, hey, those horses, we've never seen those animals. If we play music, if music is played, those horses will hear the sounds of the music. They'll hear the notes, but they won't be able to connect them. They won't understand the tune. Whereas you and I, we're listening, we might be moved to tears and weep because there's meaning there. So it's not nothing. It's our ability to not construct meaning, but to be in a place where the meaning can be revealed to us. And if the story of Shardik is anything, it's the story of God breaking Keldric, breaking Melithus, refashioning them so that they are now able, to paraphrase Jesus, they have eyes and they can now see, and they have ears and they can hear. Do you see how subtly but powerfully Adams is bringing that, finding that ability to perceive, the blindness, the central blindness of us, especially of believers. Keldric goes on here, and he continues. He says, he's talking to Siristu. I've wandered very far. I've seen the world blasphemed and ruined. But I've no time nowadays to dwell on that. The children, you see, they need our time. Once I used to say, accept my life, Lord Shardik. Well, that prayer's been answered. He has accepted it. Keldric's redemption arc has come full circle. He's fully redeemed. And the fullness of redemption is not just the deliverance, the forgiveness, okay, the brokenness. It's not just the being broken before God, so you realize your ultimate, your complete need and dependence on him. But it goes further. Oh no, the redemption is this new creation, this new person coming into being. And we see a new Melithus, and at the end we see a new Keldric here. And now he's no longer this, why did Shardik die? It was right in front of his nose. His eyes have been opened. His ears have been opened. He sees and perceives. He hears. He understands. Yeah, it's the children. It's God's children that God is concerned about. It's freeing the slaves. And remember that in this sense, even Genshad was a slave. He was converted. He served evil. There's this evil power it's enslaved mankind. We saw that in John Milton in the Garden of Eden at the fall, how it took us into its slavery because it broke our only connection with the greater reality, the reality beyond, outside of our limited time and space. And yes, even this vast universe is very limited. It's a limited place of time and matter as compared to the realm in which God exists. And here we have, here we have this new creature now, that veil has been broken, and Keldric's now, he's truly the eye of God. He's truly seen now with the bear's eyes, okay? That oneness is leading to this revelation, and the revelation is leading to, this is what the purpose of my life is. This is what I should be about. This is the work that God has called me to. He's accepted my life. He's accepted my life. Notice this fullness. It's finished. It is finished. It's a finished work. At this, now notice Siristu's response here. At this, Siristu felt that at last he was on familiar ground. To remove the burden of guilt was, in his experience, the function of most, if not all, religion. So please just ignore the lawnmower in the background. To remove the burden of guilt was, in his experience, the function of most, if not all, religions. So he's this outsider. He's an unbeliever. That's what something Helga Hopewell would have said before her encounter with real evil. You feel that Shardik takes away, that he forgives you. Now listen very carefully, because remember, Adams is a Christian writing to a Christian audience, and he's seeing something that obviously he thinks Christians are blind to, that they're seeing but not perceiving. They're hearing Sunday after Sunday, they're hearing these things, but they're not understanding them. Well, I don't know about that, answered the governor. I don't know about that he's forgiven me. But once you know what you have to do, forgiveness matters much less. The work is too important. God knows I have done much wrong, but it is past now. It is past now. So here's a sense that, if we're just stopped at the cross, forgive me, Lord Jesus. Okay, forgive me, Lord Jesus. But then we don't exercise that forgiveness. We don't go beyond the blood of Jesus. I mean, we go through it. It's the veil we go through. We're forgiven. Now, let's do God's will, because he's shown us what his will is. Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane, not my will, but your will. It is a death to self. And how does death to self really happen? It's in the little daily choices you make, where you choose not my will, not my will. I'm angry with this person, but I'm not going to act on my anger. I'm acting on who God is, on his will. And in the will, oneness is forged. Let's go on then to the very last point, because Adam's not done. He's not done there. He's shown us now this complete redemption of Melithus and Keldric and Shouter too. Notice that the Shouter, he has a new name, Communion, and notice that Shouter's role, and Shouter too has been redeemed. So be very careful, be very alive to that in this final chapter. But here then we come back, like the final chapter opens with Cyrus writing a report back to his king back in Zakhelan. So here it ends here with Cyrus writing a report again to his king back in Zakhelan. And what Adams is giving us here is a view of what has transpired, what has come into being through the events of this book, to an unbeliever. So these are the unbelievers. Cyrus is an unbeliever. The Dilgi are unbelievers. The band of Sarkid and Randu, they were unbelievers in terms of Shardik. Okay, they might believe in a god, but not Shardik. And Shardik is the power of God. He's the messenger of God. If you want to know who God really is, you have to go through Shardik in the context of the book. So here is his Cyrus reporting to his king. Your Majesty is aware. I'm on page 601. Well, almost to the end of the book. Your Majesty is aware of my interest in religious and metaphysical matters, and you will understand me